Hello and welcome to the Kick Sugar Summit, the world's first summit on the topic of sugar, sugar addiction, and sugar addiction recovery. We know that if we're going to reverse our rising rates of chronic disease, we need to reduce or eliminate our consumption of sugar and refined carbohydrates. We are here to help you do that. There are a lot of speakers on our summit and a lot of information. Don't get overwhelmed. Catch who you can and just let the rest go. Alternatively, you could purchase one of our Summit VIP packages, which comes with an awesome ebook summarizing the core insights of each speaker, a year's worth of resources from our world of experts, and access to a whole year of weekly drop-in live Q&As with me, Florence, your host. Thank you for being here. I hope you love the summit, and I hope it changes your life.
Welcome, welcome. I am so excited to be talking today with Bitten Jonsson, such a long time mover, shaker, and professional in the food addiction recovery universe. Welcome, so glad to have you here today, Bitten.
Thank you, very happy to be here with you.
So I'll read a little bit about you for those who are newly introduced to you today. Bitten Jonsson is a world-renowned trainer of sugar addiction counselors with nearly 40 years of experience in addiction medicine and treatment. Based in Sweden, Bitten is a registered nurse, addiction specialist, and authorized provider of the sugar diagnostic assessments and training. Her expertise spans the full range of addiction screening and diagnostic assessment to relapse prevention, long-term recovery, holistic addiction medicine, and comprehensive training for professionals. Bitten's signature training courses include the Sugar Licensing and Holistic Medicine for Addiction. So welcome again. So glad to have you with us, Bitten.
Thank you.
Now, some of our audience members will be longtime fans and followers of your work and your career, and some will be meeting you for the first time in our video today. So our conversation will really reflect that range, and hopefully you'll be able to talk about both things that you've discussed before in previous interviews, as well as things that are new and upcoming for you.
Okay.
All right. So to start off, you've talked a lot about your own autobiography of addiction and your journey of recovery and your journey into the field. And so what is the kind of crucial information that our listeners should know about you and about your journey to help frame our conversation today and kind of get to know you a little bit?
Okay. Well, I'm a traditional nurse. I grew up in Sweden in the country. With healthy food at that time because we didn't have anything else, because I'm 70 now. And if you look back to my childhood, those years, we didn't have all the junk food, the processed food and all that. So that was the beginning for me. But I loved sugar cubes and we had those in coffee. So I stole those. That's how my journey started. I loved sugar and especially chocolate and ice cream. But, I never encountered a problem until I came to nursing school and started dieting. And I've talked about this a lot, and I think dieting, being on and off on any diet is dangerous, very, very dangerous, because it really destroys the metabolic and hormonal change in our bodies. And it really hampers our brain from developing. So that's what really got me into consequences. If you see, I didn't really notice so much when I was growing up and a teenager and all that, but it was the, dieting part that kicked everything off. And when I started, dieting in nursing school, and then we came up with the good idea that we should start smoking as an appetite suppressor. So, before I knew it, I think I was addicted to nicotine from the first package. And I didn't understand it, didn't know anything about addiction at that time. So I thought it was really fancy to smoke. And of course, I ate less. So it worked in the beginning. But then as part of the culture in Sweden, being in nursing school with all these women, we wanted to go out dancing. Of course we did. And having fun. And then I started drinking. And the funny thing when I look back is that I loved alcohol from the first time. I remember the first time in the spring of 1972 when I tasted alcohol. I was 19 years. And, I absolutely loved it. Loved it. And I didn't see any problem with that either. And I could handle alcohol very well, which is a dangerous sign that you can, harbor a lot. So here I was, going to nursing school, eating sugar and junk food, smoking and drinking. And that took an end of disaster, of course. And I'm going to make a long story short. I've talked about this so many times. And I'm also going to talk more about it in the book I'm translating to English now that I hopefully come out this year. But anyway, so, I moved to US. I met my American husband and moved to US. And he started protesting against my drinking. And I ended up in a treatment center in Capistrano by the Sea in California in 1985. And I've been sober since. And that's the best thing that happened to my life, to be 6 weeks in a treatment center for addiction. And I learned a lot there. And it's also when I fell in love with addiction medicine. I realized that I didn't want to go back to nursing ever again. I decided that this is what I'm going to work with for the rest of my life, because it had such a profound effect on me, coming from a country where it had a high stigma to be addicted, to be an alcoholic and a woman, lots of shame, lots of pain. It was a moral flaw. And it was, of course, so that you were broken psychologically. You had to have a trauma in your luggage. Otherwise, you couldn't be an alcoholic. I didn't have any of that. I just loved alcohol. And it had an incredible addictive component in my brain. So I thought, I'm going to go out and save the world and teach them this, that addiction is a brain illness. And it is the drug that is dangerous, no matter where you come from. And I had no idea that, sugar could be addictive at this point. So, but after 7 years in recovery, I met Terence Gorski at CNAPS Corporation, relapse prevention specialist. And he was the next big thing in my life that made a profound effect on my life, because I had a 2-day training with him. And I have always, watched I could see addiction medicine from a very different point of view after that. Because one of the things he said at that time, this was 1992, right? He said that alcohol and drug addicts that keep drinking lots of coffee, eating junk food, and smoking, they would relapse faster than anyone that didn't do that. And my nursing brain said, I remember this moment so well when he said this in the lecture, and my nursing brain said, wait a minute, how is this connected? We didn't know anything about addiction interaction disorder at that time. We didn't see nicotine as the powerful drug it is and all that, and definitely not junk food. And also, by the way, I didn't think I had any problem with food because I didn't eat junk food, which in my world, this is incredible too, was only McDonald's. That's the only thing I associated with junk food. So chocolate and ice cream is not junk food, right? At least it wasn't to me. You can see how crazy. And as a nurse, that's very embarrassing, how little I knew about nutrition. I knew nothing. We weren't trained in that. We never talked about that. Eat normal was the sort of, thing that people threw out. Eat like normal. But anyway, so after going home after those 2 days with him in Sweden in 92, I knew I had to quit smoking. And I thought, well, I don't have to quit coffee. I can cut down on coffee. And thank God I don't eat junk food. So this is going to be easy, right? So I went home and quit smoking. And, 6 months later, I was very, very sick. And I didn't understand first at all. I thought maybe I had Lyme's disease or chronic fatigue syndrome, or I thought of several things because I was so tired. I could sleep 14 hours and then I almost fell asleep in the middle of a sentence. And I didn't do the connection. it was, of course, that, I binged every evening on chocolate and ice cream because I felt that I'd been such a good girl quitting smoking. So, I could, give that to myself in the evening. And deep down, there was a voice saying, wait a minute, this is not healthy. This is weird. You're hiding, lying, and sneaking with how much you eat of, the sugar. So anyway, one day I met this American lady that I worked with. She was over here training us, and I said to her, can you explain one thing to me? I quit alcohol. It wasn't, such a big deal. It was painful, but it wasn't, really very, very hard. I quit nicotine. That wasn't that hard either, but it was tougher than the alcohol. But now I cannot quit chocolate and ice cream. What's wrong with me? And she said to me, well, you're probably a food addict. And I started laughing almost. Food addict? I never binged on cod or a piece of meat or meatballs or, I never binged on that. So food addict wasn't the correct terminology for me. But anyway, later on, I understood sugar addiction, the psychoactive part of food that affects my brain. It's the same like alcohol, heroin, whatever psychoactive drug you talk about, or process addictions like gambling, sex and relationship, starving, binging, purging, volume eating. Those are process addictions in my world. So anyway, they're caused by the sugar addiction in the beginning. So now I've told you my whole story. What else shall I tell you?
Thank you.
I tried to be short.
No, it's wonderful.
It's a long story. It's been many years. But anyway, in October 93, I went over to Lutheran General Hospital in Chicago, where they had a team working with, as they call it then, food addiction. And I spent a week with them, and I got help for myself. And I got the first embryos, little seeds of thinking, that I wasn't planning on working with it at that time. But I came home and I was very happy. And people said to me, what happened to you? What's happened to you? Oh, I've been to the US and I'm a food addict. And they said, you're crazy. And I said, yeah, maybe. But that's how it started anyway. So it's going to be, 30 years this October.
Wow. Congratulations. And thank you for guiding us through that journey. So it sounds like you did learn quite a bit about the science behind sugar addiction. And so take us, briefly through your understanding of what is that science behind sugar addiction.
Well, no, I didn't learn about sugar addiction at that time. I learned about addiction. I learned about alcohol, benzodiazepine, opioids, street drugs, and all that. So I learned what addiction is all about. And we only have one reward center. So any addiction is the same. So, you don't have to learn alcohol addiction and then sugar addiction. If you understand addiction, you understand addiction. You see what I mean? It's exactly the same. And the treatment protocol or toolbox or method or whatever, it's built on the treatment I went through for my alcohol addiction. So it's the same thing. They are interchangeable. Psychoactive drugs are psychoactive drugs. And if you are born with a genetic sensitivity to develop addiction, it usually starts with sugar for everyone. It's a gateway drug. And then you end up developing, so into other psychoactive drugs or outlets. That's the way addicts look today. But we didn't have the name of that at that time. We saw it, but we didn't understand what we saw. Basically, what we saw in the beginning was that alcoholics, if they got sleeping pills or painkillers, they got addicted to them too. So we called it cross addiction. But, it was just development of one outlet after the other. So sugar paves the way. It changes the reward center so that you become more prone to other psychoactive substances and processes.
Yeah, I really appreciate your focus on that and the way that you kind of create that umbrella of addiction in general. or identify that umbrella of addiction in general. And that's something that's been really important in my recovery as well, is to recognize the ways that addiction, is not limited to one kind of addiction or another. And I think that can be something that is sometimes missing from the sugar addiction community, or the food addiction community, is this idea that like, well, food addicts and sugar addicts are different than other kinds of addiction.
I know, especially people that talk about food addiction, they have that notion that that is some special addiction on a special planet out in space. That's why I am so, tough on calling it sugar addiction, because I understand psychoactive substances, and I don't call it eating disorder or disordered eating or whatever names they try to come up with. That I have a PowerPoint that I show people, and I think I have 14 or 15 different names of what this kind of eating problem is. That's very, very dangerous, because if we don't have a common name and talk about the psychoactive substance effect on the reward center, we're never going to, get it in the diagnose manuals, ICD-11 and DSM-5. That's one thing, because we can't come up with a common name on it. The other thing is that people that call it this and that, and, food addiction and eating disorder and disordered eating and God knows what, binge eating or purging eating or blah, blah, blah. They all have different takes on the method of treatment. So, they talk about intuitive eating for an addict. That's whoo, we laugh our ass off. Sorry for the French, but it's not going to work. Or moderation eating, like David Wolfe, my colleague in Sugar X Global, he say that that's like talking about the white unicorn, moderation eating for an addict. And all of these opinions, I would call them opinions, where people don't understand. That's why I call myself an addiction specialist. I understand addiction at the root. And, any addiction, you can talk to me about any outlet. I know it goes back to the same thing and the same thing and the same thing. It's not different types. So that's very important because you cannot help somebody that is addicted if you don't understand addiction in the pit of your stomach. That's my pet project to talk about, so to speak, and understand the science behind it. There is tons of science about addiction medicine, and also today it's very important, and people talk a lot about dopamine. There is many neurotransmitters in your brain. There are several gas pedals, several brakes. They all work together. And the thing that we have to look at is the balance between them. You can't only focus on one neurotransmitter. Dopamine is very important. And you know what? When I was in treatment in 1985, they sent me to University of Irvine to meet the researchers that started to do research on the dopamine system, 1985. I mean, there's tons of research. There's tons of deep knowledge about sugar's effect on the brain and the body, right? On the microbiome, on the metabolic chain, on the hormonal chain, on the brain, and on and on. We could go on and on. There's so much science, it's unbelievable. And the interesting question is instead, how come not everybody see this every day in the papers, everywhere, at the doctor's office? What is stopping that? That's a more interesting question, because, people that say there is no science, I say, oh, you belong to the Flat Earther Society? I didn't know that. That's my comment, So it's a good question. And I really like to raise the issue of us understanding addiction, and then talk about different psychoactive substances, and then talk about process addictions that act in the same biochemical way on your reward center. You get the same hit on your neurotransmitter system from gambling if you're a gambling addict, or if you're a sex or relationship addict. You get high from starving if that's your thing, And this all goes back to many, many years ago when I trained in all the neurotransmitters to understand how dopamine could be the conductor in the symphony in your brain, but it affects everything, serotonin, GABA, acetylcholine, adrenaline, noradrenaline, endorphins, and so on. So it's not one neurotransmitter that we're looking for, but that's so typical the whole society we live in. It has to be one ill, one pill, right? Instead of the holistic view. That's why I train people in holistic thinking, because in my world, everything is connected with everything. If you look at something you love to eat, your insulin going to raise. It's not going to happen in your eyes. It's happening all over your body. What I'm trying to say that the physiology and the biochemistry of our human being is something we have to lift much more, because you are a biochemical being. So
you mentioned that there's so much science out there that addiction medicine specialists and professionals have generated, but that the science doesn't seem to be penetrating the mainstream or even penetrating mainstream healthcare, much less the mainstream average person. So what do you think are some of those barriers? Why, that interesting question of why can't we seem to get addiction medicine into our healthcare system and into the public consciousness?
I've been pondering that question for, ever since I entered treatment. No, not the first weeks, because the first weeks I hated being there and I didn't want to be an alcoholic. I hated it. But, once the coin drop. And I remember that day and that moment when I watched the movie, that the coin dropped in the treatment center about addiction. And it was a movie by Dr. Ohms. You can still find it on YouTube. And it was like, oh my, boy, have I been fooled, not understanding that this is an illness, And the shame started to go away. And I started, being erect and say, wait a minute, I want to know more. I want to know more. And that's the way it's been for me. And, you can say, well, yeah, maybe it is the food industry doesn't wanting us to understand how dangerous processed foods is. Well, that's maybe one thing, I think there are so many different variables. One thing is that people love this stuff. They don't want to get rid of it. They say, I can't live without it, so I can't do your treatment, or there's no meaning living if I can't have my whatever bread or pasta or God knows what. To recover is a very, very hard journey, very tough journey in so many ways. So I think that's one of the things too. And also another thing that's very dangerous when you look at all the drugs that's out there. I'm talking about street drugs and pills and opioids and alcohol and all those things, is that we have become it's been so normal that the normalizing process, the sickness is normal today. That's another very scary thing. And one thing is that if you get these things in your system at 4 or 5 years of age, or maybe earlier, your brain is going to get hampered. You don't know anything else. Follow the money. We could talk about that. I think, this would be an interesting 2-day conference to just talk about this issue. How come it doesn't penetrate? I love that you use that word. And also, I think that there is some massive forces behind keeping addiction, as a moral flaw, or people in society need somebody to look down upon, and they don't want to raise it. And that's the reason, there's a lot of talk, we should call it substance use disorder or da-da-da. And I said, nope, I'm going to call a spade until I die. And that's why I say addiction, addiction, addiction. So I want to make that word something, that is not scary in any way, shape, or form, to say, hi, my name is Bitten. I'm an addict. My outlets have been, do you have an addiction? What's your outlet? And we say, oh, and we talk, What's your journey? And da da da. So it could be something maybe not really being proud of. I'm proud that I survived it. I'm a survivor of it. Because, and also want to say that I've got tons of people, role models walking ahead of me. And they told me early on, if you see somebody that have something you want, do as they did. So I think that was, and also said to me, this is easy. All you have to do is change everything in your life. And I go, oh God, I give up right now before I start. But, they told me to do it baby steps, one day at a time. I shouldn't do it all. I got all these beautiful advice, people that supported me, no matter what, all the time, support. If I fell on my knees, they said, get up, brush your knees off, and let's walk again. That attitude, and then making it through the science, through the knowledge, making it to understand that it is an illness. I didn't cause it.
Yeah.
I did not cause my own illness. I had no idea I would be addicted by stealing sugar cubes when I was 4 or 5 years old. How in the whole world would I know? And also, I like to say that having an addicted prone brain is a superpower. I'm very, very convinced of that today. I have so many friends that are in recovery, and I see that all the time. We are very, very sensitive. We are sensitive to foods that we put in our body, to supplements, to weather, sound, pain. We have a very sensitive brain, but I'm a space freak. I love space research. So, I'm following the Webb telescope out there now and looking at all the pictures that come back. I love that. And to me, the Webb telescope, I looked at how they made it. I'm totally, absolutely, floored by that. How can they do that and send it out there? That's a very sensitive instrument. Would anyone think that sensitivity here is a bad word? No. So having this sensitive brain, the problem is that you need a very special driver license. You need to understand how to run it. And, we are many, many people out in the world today that can help you, that we learned how to have that driver license. We can teach you how to do it. You don't have to suffer under this illness anymore. You can be happy, joyous, and free. So, come on. The knowledge is here, the tools are here, and that's what I've done all the time. I go my own way and, develop new things all the time. That's the kind of personality I am, because if I come up with an idea when I go to bed tonight and I think, wonder, could that, or that might work, I do it tomorrow. I don't have a committee and talk about how to do it step by step, planning it for 3 years. I start tomorrow. You know what? If it doesn't work, I redo it. You have to dare do stuff and start. And I said, oh, it might not work. And I said, how do you know that? Have you tried? No. So try. So we need to help each other, to support each other, to be more gutsy and courageous. Try it out. You might like it. If you don't, do something different. So, I think that's one of the things that have made me create the treatment I did for years. I've treated thousands and thousands of clients, and I only work with group because one-on-one doesn't work on addicts. That's like, chasing a slippery soap in a slippery bathtub. I said that many times in interviews, and that's true. You need the group. You need definitely a group. And also training staff to understand. But my main issue is the thing I started telling you. You have to understand addiction in the pit of your stomach. Once you do that, things becomes easy. If you don't get that, if you don't surrender to that fact, if you don't accept that fact, you're going to walk in circles. You're never going to get anywhere.
Absolutely. And I think as you're discussing, I think one of the huge barriers to that is the stigma. And,
that's baffling to me that a kid, because I lost that when I understood it was a brain illness. So how can you still be there? I mean, come on, step out in this reality. It's an illness.
I agree. I agree. And I love something I do for my own recovery and for people I talk to about addiction is just comparing addiction to any other chronic illness that requires a certain protocol for treatment. If you
Yep.
have
Yep.
asthma, there's no stigma around that. That kind of.
No.
I agree with you completely.
One of my very good friends, Birgitta Brune, she's a doctor and orthomolecular medicine doctor, and she has multiple sclerosis, have had for many, many years. She is in remission. And, we met at the conference where we started talking about what we did. Multiple sclerosis is a brain illness. We know 5 types today. Addiction, is a brain illness. We started talking, how do you treat it? And we realized we do it the same way. We work with the same tools, with biochemical repair, with stress management, with sleep, microbiome, supplements, relaxation, spirituality. I mean, on and on and on. That was fascinating. So I like to really compare addiction with multiple sclerosis.
Yeah, that's a great comparison as well. And another thing I wanted to kind of have you talk a little bit more explicitly about is, your treatment protocol or your kind of treatment philosophy. And you've mentioned in a couple of different ways that you really, favor a holistic approach. And it sounds like just with the kind of language you use, that you've really brought together several different kind of wisdom traditions and bodies of knowledge to apply to treating addiction. And so what are some of those? I hear maybe some of a 12-step background, obviously neuroscience and biochemistry. There's so many different knowledge systems that we can apply to this. And what would you say about that?
Well, I think one of the dangers we see in society today, which is a curse and a blessing, is the high specialized care we have. I mean, I love that we have doctors that are highly specialized in blood illnesses and heart illnesses and cancer and on and on and on. But, one of the problems with that is that they don't communicate very well. They lose the track of the whole human being. And if you look at spirituality, there is so much your frame of mind is one thing that is so important to believe in something, because addicts, their higher power is the drug when they're active in the addiction, right? So you have to replace that. So that's one important thing. And then integrated functional medicine, I love that. And orthomolecular medicine, and if you look at those two definitions, it talks about healing the body with the most natural things for the body. Instead of one nail, one pill, which is, the way the medical world is and the pill industry and everybody is thinking today. We have an illness and we try to do research to find a pill. Well, any pill will have side effects and it doesn't tell you what you can do yourself. And I believe very much in giving people power themselves. So, okay. As a nurse, I don't like to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So I believe in traditional medicine. So part of the thing I've done through the years is my nursing training, traditional medicine. But I also see that I can teach people a lot about lifestyle medicine, things they can do themselves. I just remember, when we had the thing and we had a dentist come in and talk to our clients when I had a treatment center. And he made a beautiful lecture about how your dental care is so important for your heart care. A dentist comes in and teaches us. That was one little example. So many of these things. So I brought all these things in. I brought, a reverend in to talk about shame, how to take away shame. I had a naturopathic doctor come and talk about the microbiome. And, I brought all these people in because I met them and I saw that you have to address everything. Because, okay, even if you have an illness in your reward center, it's going to affect your whole body, your insulin, your thyroid. Thyroid is extremely sensitive for junk food, It shuts down if you load it with a lot of junk. And also the tradition I came from with the 12-step model, the treatment I was in was sobriety-based treatment. And I love that. I think that that's something we should try to go for first. If that doesn't work, I don't mind using subscription medicine or anything else you might need, because if you know that so many of those pills have saved so many lives. Vaccine for polio. I could go on and give you so many examples, but there is also a point where we have to ask ourselves, is the lifestyle I'm living, so destructive to me that I need pills, but I'm not willing to change the lifestyle? And then we have to start thinking, what is a human being? Well, there's lots of cells with lots of mitochondria, and we need to understand, the fabric in us and how we relate to other human beings. So then it becomes simple. Everything is connected to everything. So I started talking about insulin resistance and leptin resistance 2008. Nobody spoke about that time. Now that's very in. I talked about that. It was so popular to say, I eat because I'm depressed. And I said to people, no, you're depressed because you eat. Your brain is damaged. And now we have Brain Energy Book and Christopher Palmer and Georgia ED. We have all those people talking about these things. But I saw that. I mean, I couldn't close my eyes and not see it when I talked about that for such a long time. And I saw how the traditional medical care treated the consequences of addiction. That, I think, really blew me apart when I, for years and years, saw that they only treated, the inflammation, the diabetes, the depression, the whatever you had, which I clearly saw because I work with those diagnostic tools, the Addis and the sugar. So I know when the addiction started. And, all these things came later in the progression in the curve. If you look at the sugar curve that I do, you're going to see that clearly. Here starts the sugar addiction, and 10 years later, this person is starting to starve herself and become what society would call an anorectic, and then binging and purging, and then she get 2 new diagnoses, binge eating disorder and then overeating disorder and so forth. But it was the sugar addiction is causing these. They are compensatory behaviors that you do because you try to control the incredible, painful, horrendous craving that you have as an addict, as a food addict, a sugar addict. So it was very easy to see that the way I mapped it. And also my personality is a helicopter. I get easily bored with too much details. When you break things down to too much details, I fall asleep. I go up in my helicopter and I say, oh, that's connected to that, and that's connected to that. And oh, I see, that's interesting. So many times when I study science and I listen to things, I see the connection. So I like to say I connect the dots. And I also like to say about addiction that I always put the horse in front of the wagon and not the other way around. So that's sort of how I developed the treatment model, with thinking. And also, many years ago, I've seen so many times how so many addicts with, all kinds of outlets, they go to psychotherapy and the psychologist, and they get worse and worse and worse. And you know why? Because nobody teaches them to take away the drug or to do biochemical repair. So then I heard this psychiatrist, Daniel Amen, he said once in something I watched on YouTube, if you're going to do therapy, you have to restore that person's mental horsepower first. And if you understand mitochondria and energy, you understand that it's dangerous to do psychotherapy on somebody that has a very, very low energy, that is drugged and biochemically totally, ruined and have a microbiome that is screaming at you. I wouldn't do that. That's very bad. So that's why I say that biochemistry first. Repair the biochemistry so you restore the energy level, you work on all that. Very simple. Nutritionist, right food, take away the dangerous drug foods. And then that's number one. Food is medicine and fuel. I'm a strong believer in that. And then number two is breathing. Most people overbreathe. That's why I suggest that you tape your mouth at night, that you use a relaxator. That is the most incredible biochemically repair tool you can use. So I teach that since 2013. And then it is sleep, to work on how do you improve your sleep. Very important. There is so many different tools you can use to improve your sleep, because that is one of the most profound healing tools we have. And these are no rocket science. Do these things, right? Learn to breathe, eat right, sleep well, and then physical activity. You can't, in a body that has this severe lack of energy, if you force that to high intensity training, you destroy a lot. You're going to go into an incredible craving, and you're going to start binging again, and you go into this loop and vicious circle and downhill. So, you can't hold on to a good food plan. So, I mean, you see, all go together. So for some people, I say, okay, it's enough to put your joggers on, step out on the porch, stand there for 3 seconds, go back in. That's your first, exercise for today. And maybe you do the same tomorrow. Then the next day you take 5 steps, and so on. You have to teach people physical activity. They always think it's some hardcore exercise. It's not. That's dangerous. House cleaning is good exercise. I think that's beautiful. Your house is clean. And be out in nature. That is one of the most, if you study, there's a lot of science on what happened when you hug a tree. That's no woo-woo, it's science. They have, special places in Japan. And if you're burnout or, depressed or sick in some way, you can get a prescription from the doctor to go to that special forest. So we know that works. So I encourage people to be outside, in nature, and listen to nature and birds and animals and all that, because, they're made of the same stuff as we are. That's a big part of the spirituality. And then I use supplements as crutches. And people come to me and say, what supplements shall I eat? And they forget step 1, 2, 3, 4, right? They wouldn't go straight for the supplement, and they think, what kind of amino acid can I take to raise dopamine? And I said, oh, Jesus. And they have a very broken microbiome. And I said, oh, so if you do that, you could eat this and that. And I said, but if you do that, you might as well pour the whole jar down in your bath, in your toilet, and flush. Because, if your microbiome is broken, it's not going to be an uptake in your body. So that's why, everything is connected to everything. I mean, we don't have time to go into all the details, but it's very simple. So this is the magic to see when you start working with a client. They come in, you can see in their eyes there is no energy. They feel shame. They don't really want to look you in the eyes. They feel desperate. They grab for some miracle thing, and they have no energy. And they look at many have looked at me and said, "Oh, are you going to tell me to eat less and move more?" And I said, "No, I'm going to tell you that it's forbidden to move." And they look shocked at me. And things like I say too, they say, "I'm so depressed, that's why I eat." And I said, "Sure, are you sure you're depressed?" And I have, they fill in forms so I can see. "Are you sure you're really depressed?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm so depressed." And I said, "No. What if I ask you, could you have any lack of energy on a cellular level?" And most people that I meet are not medical people, so they look at me shocked. "What are you saying? What are you talking about?" I said, could you have lack of energy on a cellular level? And the light goes on. That's what's the magic with saying that. People know intuitively that something is connecting. And I said, yeah, I would say you're right. Because I'm so drained of energy that nothing is fun. That's why I feel depressed. So, it wasn't depression. It was low energy. So, and also something that we have to, before, in the beginning, when I learned this field, we wrote a journal. And I think that was a very good dialogue with yourself. I ate this and I felt this. But the feeling, I always thought that was something screwy with that. So, because, and then with addicts, I understand that before your brain is healed, you have false feelings. You have false negative thoughts. Automatic negative thoughts. And that's another thing, to try to analyze that is absolutely crazy. So leave that be and restore the energy. And that's why it's so important when you work with addicts that you start behavior changes first. You don't talk about feelings and thoughts. That comes much later. But what you talk about is you do a food journal and you write down your level of energy. And you start seeing how the food will heal from the inside, and you get more energy. And the more energy you get, the more things you want to do for recovery. So, don't slam somebody with a protocol with 40 things that they should do. One thing, one step, very slowly. So that's the foundation.
Yeah. And I think it's so important how you bring it back to, I think one of the most common misconceptions that I've run into as I've gotten to know the addiction recovery field more and more is the type of relationship that there is between trauma and addiction. Not that there is or isn't a relationship, but it doesn't seem to be the relationship people think it is. And one of the things I am constantly find myself saying, is that you can't therapize your way out of addiction. And so coming back to, your point about being that primary illness, that biochemical, the biochemical groundwork, it doesn't mean that someone may or may not have trauma in their past.
No. And, addicts could have the most beautiful childhood, no trauma, still be addicted. You can have a horrible childhood, lots of trauma, and be addicted. But one thing, addiction is not caused by trauma. It's caused by drugs. I'm going to give you an example. Are you familiar with the opioid crisis in the US?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, the OxyContin. And also, that many people in the world want to legalize marijuana or cannabis.
Yes, this is happening all over.
Yeah, and that is a disaster. That is one of the most dangerous things we can do. But what's the myth behind that? Well, the myth is, and it's the same with food, certain foods, psychoactive foods. It's only if you're broken somehow, you become addicted. No. The drug has a profound effect on our primitive brains. So that is downplaying, they want to underestimate and fool you that it's safe for you because you're not broken. If you have this addictive prone brain, but you feel wonderful and you start taking the drug, it can all go to hell very fast because you become addicted. So I want to say never, ever, ever underestimate a psychoactive substance effect on your primitive reward center. That's the way I want to put it. So that's why it's dangerous to mix this, because if you have several traumas or horrible childhood, you have to heal your brain first in order to really be able to heal in the depth of yourself from the trauma and the misery you've been in. You have to have the power, the energy to do that.
And that's knowledge that you can take directly from populations in addiction recovery. I think almost everyone I've ever met in long-term sobriety and long-term addiction recovery would self-report, and myself included, that I was unable to make the lion's share of my progress on my own psychological journey until I had healed the chemical part of the addiction.
Of course.
It couldn't be the other way around.
No, you're not a psychological being. You're a biochemical being that has psychological behaviors.
Right.
I mean, to me, to some people, psychology comes first. To me, it doesn't. Biochemistry comes first all the time. If somebody questioned that, I said, wait, okay, hold your breath for 10 minutes and we see how psychological it is.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. We have to face that, but I don't understand why we want to push that down or why we have forgotten about that. What's so wrong with being a biochemical being?
Right. I agree. And I'm hoping that will more and more catch on in mainstream culture. I think we're at a moment in which, the therapy approach is sort of paramount and primary. And like you said, it comes, it's the cart before the horse. And hopefully just we can continue kind of spreading this message and self-reporting the effects of that.
Absolutely. And also many times I've seen people that think that they are incredible, broken, traumatized and broken. But the drug has magnified that. So once they have started healing their biochemistry and get a normal daily life and close friends and intimacy with, people and restore their family bonds and all that, there's not much trauma left to therapy.
Mm. Mm.
So it was magnified. You see, that is a way, that's a thing addiction does too, to keep you in your drug, to magnify that, make it worse than it was, And I'm not talking about everyone, but I've seen those cases too. So, you have to be very careful. Where do you start helping somebody?
So well said. So you've drawn from all of these diverse knowledge systems, brought so much knowledge together to create these treatment protocols, to work with clients, to work with, to coach the next generation of, trainers and professionals. So what is next for you? What's on the horizon for you professionally? What projects are in the pipeline? What are you looking forward to?
Well, the last piece that I launched now was Addiction Meets Metabolic. So we have had a big, beautiful dive in the training in everything insulin and, metabolic dysfunction and how to heal that and all that, because I think that's an extremely important piece with sugar addicts. So that was the latest. What's new? Well, translating my book. Finally, I've talked about that for years, but I never got around to do it. Now I have this wonderful lady that is helping me doing it. So she's editing it, and I have a publisher. So I hope we are on chapter 14. There is 19 chapters, so it sounds like we're going to get there. I'm going to work on that this summer. So that's one thing that I really want to do. I would like to even more include in that book, updated with all these pieces. I started to do sort of a mind map, put addiction here and started to see all the things I could add, and it became a galaxy. It was spin off all the way, like the Milky Way. It was arms upon arms upon arms. So there is so much we can do. But the things that concern me or I would like to have more time to work on is how do we help people that don't want help? Because there are so many today and our health system is going to crash. If, we don't get people inspired or engaged in their own healing process, if they're just consuming, that scares me. What's going to happen with the next generation, with children growing up in that system? That's scary. And the drug world is worse than ever. The war in the world over drugs, all kinds of, I'm talking, other drugs. That's one thing. So, that I'm not going to be part of it. I've been out there fighting on the barricades. I'm done. But if I can inspire people to think about is there a way to work with primary prevention, which is, that it probably wouldn't happen at all, which I think with the food we have today, that's not going to happen. But I could dream, right? That somehow that might happen. And then the next thing is early intervention, secondary prevention, that the medical society, which I think is extremely important, and sort of my people, that they will embrace addiction and learn the signs and learn how to screen and assess and diagnose so people get help, because we addiction specialists were the last house on the street. When they tried everything else, starting Weight Watchers and then every method you can come up with, that's when they come to us. And that means that they are very, very sick. So it's very, very difficult to get them, into a healthy living. And it's a lot of relapses. So, if that would be the case, that the medical society would learn the signs of addiction and refer people to us, the people that understand addiction and can work with it, because I also say that, if you break your leg, don't go to the gynecologist. That's useless. So, look for addiction specialists. So that's one thing. And then the third, tertiary prevention, is of course to save what can be saved. And people that are very sick, very damaged, can we also improve how their quality of daily living will improve, helping them. So if there is anything, I would like to do that. And I also believe that if we do get a grip on sugar addiction, we might, because that leads to alcohol, nicotine, drug addiction, right? So we might get a grip on the drug world we are living in today. So I'm not going to do that, but I can inspire people to do it. I'm going to grow roses and, knit and crochet and read about space. And tonight there was a new program on space research on Swedish TV, but I can watch it on my iPad later.
Oh, fun. No, I love that vision. I love that. So have you had experience in your own practice or in your own career of successfully helping someone who didn't want help? And, have you been able to extrapolate some kind of lessons from that? Or, where do we go? How do we help when
Yes,
the world is antagonistic?
Yeah. I think in a way, I don't know, how much that is in a way, but if somebody sort of let themselves be close to me when I have my intensive cares and my lectures that I've done, traveled all over and lectured and all that, if they stick around, I'm very tough. I'm known to be very straight. Say, you're an addict. You can't do that. If you do that, you're going to die. I'm very daring in how I talk to people. And many people have told me, well, some people love that and say, oh, tell me more, tell me more. They are very open and said, oh, if you tell me to stand on one leg at the square to recover, I do it. And they do everything you tell them. So they're easy. But then there are people that fight you all the time and fight you. And that was one reason I did the sugar instrument too, because, in about an hour, I can tell you if you're addicted or not. And if you're addicted, this is what counts, so you can't argue me. So, I want people to dare do the sugar, but also people that been arguing with me. I know that the illness is what I call the red dog, and the healthy part is the blue dog. And I have a knack for seeing both in a person, so I can play them to each other. I say, I know that your blue dog wants this. And the red dog said, no, I don't. I have the knack for understanding that very deeply, and then I can push people. So I have pushed people that didn't want help, and they came out into the same beautiful recovery as the one that wanted it. But it takes a tremendous amount of guts, strength, energy, time, so that's why, and I've done that many, many times through the years. So I think that's why I one day in the spring of 2019 said, no more clients. I was done. I've used that power up. But that's not really true, but because I do coach people on the side still, that's former clients that called me and asked me about things, and I always answer and talk to them, but I don't take on any new clients and work a program with them.
But I think that's a really important point. And in fact, that may come full circle to one of our first discussion topics about how resistant mainstream medicine and mainstream culture seems to be to addiction medicine, and how do we get that? How do we get addiction medicine into mainstream medicine and mainstream culture? And I think, one of the barriers seems to be that addiction recovery is a high intensity, high resource field. It takes a lot of human resources. It takes a lot out of people, and it's a huge job up front. And it's not that we don't have the money, and it's not that we don't have the human resources. It's that we're putting them in other places. And, I think part of what we need to accept or surrender to is the fact that, addiction recovery takes a lot from a lot of people. And that's the case. And that's what it needs to be, and that's okay. And yes, we do then need to funnel in those resources.
Absolutely. And I want to put a heavy burden on the doctors.
Mm-hmm.
Because for so many people that encounter some kind of health problem, doctor is sort of, the number one ultimate authority that's going to tell me some things. So if the doctors would be more knowledgeable in addiction and more pushy and, be more upfront and straight and tell the truth, this is a brain illness and this is what you got to do, like they do with many other diagnoses like cancer, or they do a beautiful job in many of those areas, but not with addiction, because deep down the system is, it's like radioactivity in the system, that it's your own fault if you're addicted, if you're fat, if you have diabetes, blah, blah, blah. Instead of understanding and doing, I have doctors that have trained with me that do this beautiful job. And, those people, the clients that meet them are very lucky clients, because they do this straightforward job and they see results. So there have to be many, many more of those, because that is an authority. We can't come around that. Mm. Mm. They are very important people in my world to train. And I used to joke and say I would like to round them up and lock them up in a deserted island and brainwash them with addiction medicine.
Wouldn't that be great? Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation. I feel so much hope and inspiration for our future and the future of addiction medicine. Are there any final words of wisdom or final points that you want to cover, or just a final thought that you want to leave us with?
Well, just that I'm incredibly grateful for what the knowledge have done to me. And I think that knowledge is power if you use it together with others. If you learn about this with other people, that is an incredible, powerful tool. And I got to do that. So I'm blessed and I'm very grateful. And if you're listening now and you feel that you have a problem, please join us. You can join us. We are a huge, huge recovery network in the world today. And you're more than welcome. Take you with open arms. Come on. Email me and I get you in touch with people that take you into this beautiful world of knowledge and love.
And Bitten, you can attest that a life free from addictive substances is not horrible. It's not boring. It's not the end of the world. It's vibrant and beautiful. I mean, your own life, I've heard you describe as just being a wonderful, beautiful life.
But absolutely. But the thing is, when you are in the grips of the drug, your brain is so faulty wired that nothing looks fun. But when you start healing all that, and the neurons that wire together, fire together, things that you might not think is fun today will be absolutely hilarious and lovely. And you're going to discover areas you never thought you were interested in. It is absolutely true. The sky is the limit.
Beautiful,
You're
beautiful.
free. You're not free. You think you're free when you think I'm free to eat what I want, but you're not. You're had, you know. But when you are free from the food, and Kathleen Desmaisons that wrote Potatoes Not Prozac, she said that in her book. And that's something that really hit me. Her book is pretty old and I read it when it came out. When you heal food, you heal the deepest part of yourself. And that's really true because think about it. You can't live without food. You can live without alcohol, nicotine, drugs, anything. That's why, sugar addiction is tough to treat because you can't stop eating. You have to eat. So you have to get a different love relationship with real food that's going to nourish every cell, every mitochondria in your brain and your body.
Absolutely beautiful. Bitten, thank you so much.
Thank you. Do you hear my dog snoring?
I do. It's so cute.
I just wanted to tell people that, so they don't think I have a strange machine here. This little 4-pound Chihuahua, she loves to sleep on the desk when I'm on Zoom. She falls so hard asleep and she snores like crazy.
Oh my goodness, how cute. I love it. It's a perfect accompaniment to our conversation.
Oh, good. I just wanted people to know so they don't think we're doing something weird here. But she really snores loud.
Well, she's happy. She's happy.
Yeah, she's happy. Okay.
Friends.
Thank you very much, Emily. And it was a pleasure meeting you.
Yes, it was a pleasure speaking with you.
I hope you enjoyed this interview. And before you go, do one more thing. Stop, think back on the interview while it's fresh in your mind, and write down your favorite takeaway in a special dedicated journal. If you do this, at the end of the summit, you'll have a page or two of nuggets of wisdom to guide you forward. And remember, this is just the beginning. At the end of the summit, you'll be invited to attend a free webinar where I will personally summarize the key insights of our speakers and pull it all together into a practical plan of action. You can also check out our Facebook page where you can connect with others and ask questions, and our Kick Sugar Coach podcast and YouTube channel for additional inspiration. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in the next interview.